Hi friends, Laurelei Black from Blade Broom Botanica. Thanks for joining me. In this episode we're going to talk about 15 ways to scry. Okay, so technically I think there's really only one way to scry. But there are like a million different tools that you can use for scrying, and that's what we're going to cover. We're going to cover the basic technique for scrying and then all the different, 15 of the different tools that you can use, and then some of the different tips that you can use to enhance the basic technique, right? So the idea behind scrying is that you're gazing into some kind of medium and allowing images or impressions to come to you that give you clarity on a situation. So for you, those impressions may come as actual images that you see outside of yourself, or images that you see in your mind's eye, or they may come as a sense of knowing about something, like suddenly you just have an aha moment, like, oh, I get it. Or they may come as auditory sensations, again, either outside of yourself or as if somebody is speaking inside your head, and it may sound like you, and it may sound like another, but in your voice, or it may sound like somebody else entirely, but not in that I'm having a hallucination kind of way, I guess, but just sort of a comforting, I get it, this is information that I needed, that I was seeking, and it's bringing clarity to the situation. If that makes sense. Does that make sense? Tell me if that makes sense. So, and then other people get the impressions in an entirely different way. So really all of your senses can contribute to this knowing that happens. So the classic terms for this are things like clairsentience, clairaudience, clairvoyance, etc. And scrying is one of the tools that we use in order to achieve that. So probably the oldest form of divination known to humans is scrying in water. Gazing at a reflection or a focal point in a still pond, for instance, or in a well, might have been one of the earliest ways that we actually sought messages from nature or from the spirit of that pond or the spirit of that lake, or from the tutelary god of the area. And then we started developing tools that would have assisted us in being able to do that. Things like a dark mirror, or we would polish stones to get them to a glossy sheen so that we could see into that reflective surface. And what ends up happening is that whether you're using a man-made tool or an elemental natural tool. And it's worth stating right here that you can scry into any of the elements. So I've mentioned some very watery things so far, but you can scry into literally any of the elements. And I'm going to cover that when I get to the 15 things, because I am still going to give you 15 different tools that you can use. So what ends up happening is that at first you're seeing the tool, or at first you're seeing your reflection in the tool. If it's something with a high sheen or a high reflective surface. But what you want to do is you want to relax your focus. You want to relax your gaze so that you're looking not at your own face, if you can see your own face, or not at, for instance, the candle flame, if you're looking at a candle flame. But you want to look into it. You want to look through it. You want to look beyond it. And in a very metaphorical sense, eventually what you end up doing is looking beyond. Not to sound too Trelawney there with that, are you in the beyond? But you will end up sort of going beyond whatever that surface is, and really beyond the surface of things, and seeing beyond this physical space and into that other space that we're trying to connect with. And so that's essentially what scrying is, and it's at one time very, very simple. It is not a complicated procedure, and at the same time I think we can make it very complex. We can make it a lot harder on ourselves than it is. For those of you that are old enough to remember, I certainly am, in the early 90s, there were those 3D poster prints that were wildly popular, and when you first looked at them, if you were just looking at the surface, they were just sort of a pattern of, like, not really even a pattern, but they were just dots. But if you looked at them just right and kind of like let the glossiness of the glass or the plexiglass that was over it, or even just like the plastic that was wrapping around this poster, sort of be a reflection for you, and then you could look past it, past all the mess that was the non-picture, and look past the surface, like 3 feet past the surface was what you really wanted to do. That 3D image would emerge for you, and it would like pop out, and you could see this like whole 3D, you know, Ferrari or bridge or whatever the picture was supposed to be of. That's essentially the kind of look that you're trying to do. So if you're looking at the flame, or you're looking at a crystal ball, or you're looking at a bowl of water, or you know, the stone, or whatever it is that you're looking at, whatever the tool is, you're not really looking at it. You're looking through it. You're looking past it. It's a gateway. It's a portal for you, and things will come to you through that. Images will come to you through that. That's what you're trying to achieve. So I've already started mentioning some of the 15 tools, some of the 15 ways to scry. So let's get into what some of those are. So I'm gonna peek down just a little bit. So I'm gonna group these elementally. So in terms of watery based tools, you can put water in, like, obviously you can go out in nature and scry in still water. Still water is easier than moving water, although absolutely feel free to experiment and go and scry into moving water. That could work for you, right? Like, I'm not saying that that's not a thing to do, just it's probably easier, especially if you're a beginner, to scry in still water. And you're going to get a different type of message. You're going to get a different type of experience doing it in still water than in moving water. So putting water into a cup, or like just a clear cup, or an opaque cup if you want. Like, I'm not going to limit you on that, but one of the first methods that I had actually tried as a young girl, before I even knew about witchcraft. This was actually at the behest of my stepmother, who told me, oh yeah, you can meditate, you can get images and stuff if you just look into a glass of water. I was probably 11 when she told me this was, you know, a glass of water. So that's one method that you can use. Crystal bowls are a very common thing to scry with. They're actually very popular within the spiritual community, spiritualism community. So clear cup, or any cup that you like, crystal bowls, a cauldron. Cauldron is very popular, especially within the craft. And black bowls, so something that is actually a very dark container. Both a cauldron and a black bowl would be very, very dark. A lot of times when you're using something that's a dark container like that, you want to put either a stone or a piece of silver, or something else that's a bit reflective in the bottom, to give you a focal point to start with. Although you don't have to. Again, there's a lot of room for experimentation and personal preference there. So those are some different options to play with. Those are 4 of the tools. So those are some of the watery types, and they're going to give you a different feel. Like each one of those has some different symbolism involved and some different associations that come into play with them. And they're very different, for instance, from scrying in a pond. And if you're interested in this, you should try them all and see what kind of results you get. In terms of earth-based scrying, you can scry into a polished stone, like just a tumbled stone. The bigger it is, the easier it is to get messages from that. So it's going to be difficult to do with a little tumbled stone, but, you know, a bigger piece that's about, you know, yay size, or, you know, you can certainly get them that are bigger than that, although they get quite pricey. But a tumbled stone or a sphere, which is the perennial classic, gazing into a crystal ball. So quartz crystal is again, like the penultimate classic thing that you're going to be gazing into, right? The quartz ball. Although the thing that you're probably the most familiar with seeing on movies and that type of thing is actually a lead crystal ball, that absolutely clear gazing ball. That's actually a harder thing to scry with, in my opinion, because it's just clear completely all the way through. If you get a quartz crystal ball, it's going to have all these occlusions and you know, the different patterns and stuff inside of it. I actually find that a much easier thing to scry with, and I think a lot of people do. It has its natural energy to it because it's living rock, as it were. You know, it's sort of this living stone, and it has that energy to it, as opposed to the lead crystal. I enjoy it better, but your mileage may vary, so try them out if you're interested. You may even have one, you know, those lead crystal balls have been around for a while, and you may have somebody in your family that's passed one down to you because they were using it, for instance, just as a paperweight. So, you know, that may have special meaning to you. So if you've got one, use it, try it out, see how it works. And then a third one that may work out very well for you and that you may have is they've actually made, and again, you find these a lot as antique pieces, scrying jewelry. So you'll find jet, you'll find obsidian and that type of thing, where you've got sort of larger, flat, very shiny pieces. Jet doesn't necessarily come shiny, although you can find it shiny. Where, you know, you've got a scrying surface that you can actually sort of gaze into either as a ring or a necklace or that kind of thing, and that may be, again, a very nice ritual piece for you that you can use when it comes time to do that sort of work while you're already in ceremony. So those are 3 more pieces that you could look into. So those are 3 good earth-based pieces, I think. The black mirror, or the keek stain, as it's sometimes called, I'm not really sure where to put it in terms of elemental energy. I could make an argument for it in a lot of different places, so I'm just going to list it separately. But that's one that you can either buy from a reputable seller or you can make for yourself. I'll do an episode on how to make a black mirror or keek stain, which just means seeing stone, in the future. But it is basically a mirror that's got a black surface, like it's been painted black on the back with enamel, and then usually it's kept in a box, or it's been framed, and usually you keep it separate from so that it's not exposed to the light and that type of thing. But it's just a black mirror, and sometimes it's a concave black mirror, like you've made it out of a clock face, so that it has sort of a well effect to it, and you're drawn in. It can be quite a powerful tool. It's not particularly elemental in itself, I don't think, but again, I could probably, if you put me to it, I could probably make the argument for earth, air, or water on that one. If you asked me to decide which one it was, you know, maybe it just depends on your tradition as far as which element it applies to. in terms of air scrying tools, you can scry in incense smoke. I find that to be very effective. In fact, sometimes I have to very intentionally not look at the smoke in ritual spaces if scrying is not the goal, because the air tools or the air elements will take me away. I am a triple air sign, so air speaks to me quite a lot. So incense smoke, clouds, especially if you're very drawn to like seeing shapes in clouds all the time, that might be a good way for you to receive messages. Just sort of do some cloud gazing. Just make sure you're wearing sunscreen or staying in the shade yourself so that you don't get burned. Little PSA for you, I guess. And then the shifting leaves and branches on trees is another actually really excellent way to scry. So, you can just sort of camp out in the woods, find a nice spot, and if you're wanting to get messages, and especially sort of wanting to get messages from nature spirits or from the spirits on your own land or something like that, and you've got trees, you can go to the trees and ask them to give you that sort of information, and that's a very aerial way to get that sort of information. Okay, and then we have the fire tools. So the fire tools, again, are all going to give you a different types of messages or different feelings depending on what type of tool you're using. So you can scry into a candle flame. That's especially effective if you're not able to build one of the bigger fires. Maybe you're in a setting, maybe your home is just not equipped with a hearth, for instance, so you can't build a hearth fire, which is one of the tools certainly that you can use if you've got access to it. Or maybe you're in a situation, for instance, you're in a dorm. There's no hearth in a dorm, right? So you can't use that, but maybe you're able to use a small contained candle flame. So that's actually a really excellent tool. You can focus on that candle. But a hearth fire is another excellent method, but it feels very different from a candle flame, right? And it's that contained space, and so you're going to get maybe a different set of messages or a different type or feeling of messages. And that's going to feel very different from a campfire, which is more exposed, out in the open, which again is going to feel very different from a bonfire. If you're able to build a bonfire or access a bonfire, for instance, if you're at festival, say there's drumming, there's dancing, but you're able to sit off to the side, or even if you're able to dance and trance and still scry in the fire while you're doing that, that's going to be a wildly different experience than scrying, sitting down, scrying into a cauldron of water. So this is one of the reasons why I say there's one sort of method, but using these 15 different tools that I'm mentioning right now makes for really 15 different ways to scry, because using this tool changes it drastically from using that tool over there. It's just, the tool changes the flavor so much that really if you're drawn to this technique at all, you're going to find that just the experimentation of it is going to open up a whole world of divinatory practice for you. So I would like to give you a few more tips in terms of how to go about this. Now, as I mentioned, you can certainly have some movement-based scrying, but I would say that that's mostly pretty rare, right? So you can scry while you're dancing at a bonfire. Again, that's something I've done, and I know that it's possible, but I would say that that is the exception and not the rule. For the most part, you're going to want to be still and in a space where all other stimulus is sort of cut off, so that you're able to focus on that tool and focus on that point beyond, that focal point that's beyond the tool. And in order to do that, you're going to want to be able to cut off sound from other rooms if you can, so be able to put yourself into a room where you can shut the door, where you can turn off the lights, that type of thing. I find it really helpful to turn on a drumming and chanting track, something like shamanic drumming and throat singing or something like that, so that it's just sort of a repetitive loop, you know, that's going to last maybe 2 or 3 hours. So I know that it's going to be the same thing for a while, and then that way it's going to give me plenty of time and space to be able to get where I need to go internally. That's what I like. So another thing that I find really helpful, unless you're already scrying with fire, is having a candle flame somewhere in the room, somewhere where it's within, the light is within your realm of vision, but not directly in your line of sight, right? So you don't necessarily want it drawing your attention away from your tool, but you want to be able to see the flickering, unless this causes you something like, unless it triggers a seizure disorder for you, in which case skip it entirely. But that flickering light, that soft flickering candlelight, somewhere where you can see it a little bit, can be very helpful for inducing trance states and sort of altering your consciousness just a little bit. So when you're gazing with any of the earth tools, any of the air tools, any of the water tools, it can be very helpful to have a candle that's sort of just at your peripheral vision or beyond. Or if you've got a tool like a scrying mirror that's in front of you, having that candle just behind the scrying mirror can be very helpful, so that you can see that the light is flickering, but you can't see the candle. Another really helpful thing to do is to put some, if you're scrying especially in water, any of the water tools work for this, is to put some herbs or oils into the water. So you want to choose specifically herbs or oils that are linked to divination, psychic opening, trance work, that type of thing. You can do your research on that. We'll talk about some herbs in some other episodes, but that's something that you can do. Sometimes just seeing the oils making patterns or the herbs making patterns can trigger symbols for you, and sometimes just having them there will be opening for you. A lot of people also find it helpful to burn incense. Again, if you're not scrying in the incense smoke, if you are scrying in the incense smoke, then obviously you want to use an incense that's already linked to divination, to prophecy, to psychic awareness. But if you're not already doing that, then maybe think about adding that as a piece to the entire sort of ritual construct that you're doing. You know, just adding that one little element can really sort of open up your awareness and just make the process easier. So that's what I have. Those are my tips. So 15 different tools that you can think of and use. Some of them you have on hand. You know, you've got a glass of water in your house right now. Wherever you live, you have access to water. You can probably pretty easily get access to incense, whether that's a stick or cones, or making your own is not that hard. We're going to talk about that. So, you know, check out my video on making your own incense. Some kind of tumbled stone or something like that. A candle flame. These are easy things to find. So try out scrying. Let me know how it works out for you. Leave comments. Subscribe to the channel. Let your friends know about it. Tag somebody. Links and goodies and whatnot down in the description. And I'll see you guys soon. New videos every Monday at noon Eastern. Bye, guys.